Happy New Year, everybody. I have a guest from across the pond today. His name is Harry Beard, co-founder of a company called Prospect 100. And it's a company that creates opportunities for young people to grow and flourish through competition. So his organization has tapped into all sorts of opportunities. They make them available for people under the age of 25 or 25 and under. And they give them a chance to not only show off their skill sets and their abilities, but also a chance to meet some key people that can potentially put them on a productive career trajectory, if I'm saying that right. So Harry, thanks for being with me today.
Thank you so much for taking the time. And obviously we spoke a few months ago, so I'm really excited to be on this podcast specifically. I've obviously gone and listened to a load of the episodes since we spoke, etc. And I think the conversation we had, even though the conversation was like 15 or 20 minutes, I was definitely left super excited about it. So I'm really grateful to be able to get the chance to continue that conversation, maybe rewind a little bit, but have a longer period today to continue that. So thank you so much.
What encouraged me, I remember talking to you, you've got a great energy about you, and you decided to create something for young people. I remember when we first talked, we kind of went back and forth about the traditional way in which we educate our young people in the world today. And you had shared with me all sorts of ideas and thoughts around how you grew up, the things you had access to, and maybe why some of the younger people think like they do, how they access technologies, and maybe where there's a disconnect between the traditional way of educating kids and maybe some new ideas that you could bring to the table. So tell me what compelled you, what was the impetus for Prospect 100?
Yeah, so I think Prospect 100 came from a place that maybe originated almost like 5 years before that. And I think it's really interesting you bring up, I probably mentioned one anecdote, which for me has really stood out. And that was when I was at school, I remember really distinctly, I just met this guy who lived in my home. Well, spends a bit of the years, mum and his dad live in different places. His dad lives in my hometown. And I just met up with him, and he is a pretty big artist on Instagram called Ketnips, Ketnipz, for anyone watching. He's got just shy of 3 million followers on Instagram. It's a cartoon series, basically run on his own. And at the time, he was like 17, 18 years old. And it's, for me, one of the best Instagram accounts on the internet. So I've been super fascinated by him. And I remember talking to him about, how'd you get into the world of art at such a young age? And obviously, he's in this weird space between animation and cartoons and comics, but it is fundamentally art. I was just asking so many questions and so fascinated. And, he was a really humble 17, 18-year-old. And you don't need to be a moron to go and Google how much some of these franchises can be worth if they continue taking off. And obviously, he on Instagram has more followers than some of the biggest franchises of all time. So I've no doubt he'll be a very successful guy, etc. And I was just so fascinated by how humble he was. But what he was saying was super interesting to me about how he got to a lot of art and the fact he was sat in a classroom and not really interested in subjects. So he'd be doodling on his papers and then turning these doodles into actually, let me upload these to Instagram, because maybe gain a following. And he taught himself really what is important in the art world, what people are looking for and what helps to build a following. I remember like maybe a month later, there was this building in my school where like all the artists go, I guess. And I used to love hanging out there because it was a really chilled out spot and everyone was super creative. I thought that was cool. And I remember a student asking someone about career advice. And the advice about getting into the art industry that was being given was completely foreign to the advice or to the story that I was hearing from Harry Hambley. Now, obviously, there's different routes into every industry, but these two routes were super different. You've got one guy who, in my eyes, again, is one of the hottest prospects in the art world right now, talking about Instagram and talking about social media and talking about building a brand and curating a very distinct style, etc. And then you had someone else talking about it's important to go to university. It's important to go and get internships at auction houses or art galleries. And Hambley had never done any of that. And yet he was still really successful. And it was interesting to me that he was able to effectively turn art into his career while still being at school. And he was able to do things that, he could easily have just turned up to art class and just done the bare minimum that you need to do to get like an A grade, or I don't know what the exam system is in America exactly, but he could have done enough to get to university. But instead he was saying, no, I want to do this on Instagram because that's a different currency. And I think that for me is more valuable than the currency of an A, because all A is going to get me is maybe an internship or maybe a place at university, whereas I believe my Instagram following and what I'm doing on here will also potentially get me those opportunities, but also could get me more, etc. And I was just so fascinated. I was like, every kid in this room should be listening to catnips. They should be speaking to catnips and learning from catnips. And but how does anyone in the room know that catnips exist? But also then I was thinking from the other side of the fence, like, if I'm a teacher right now, how do you give career advice? Because what catnips is telling me, this stuff didn't exist literally a handful of years ago. So if you're a teacher or if you're someone that's meant to be giving career advice, how do you stay on top of all of these things? Because there are very few catnipses in the world. Let's not delude ourselves, but it's definitely something that I think is interesting and more people should be hearing about because it just offers a new perspective. So I was really looking at it from both sides of the fence. Like, if you're a kid, where do you go for advice? And if you're an older, like, traditionally you always look to older generations for advice when it comes to career and stuff like that. How are they keeping on top of everything? Because it's hard enough, to be evolving on your own in this ever-changing world, let alone evolving fast enough to be able to give other people advice. And so I see there being a massive issue here in terms of young people don't know where to go. And traditionally, you always go to older people. Like, that is what, if I went to my parents and said, who do I go to for advice? They'd be so, go to a career advice officer at school. They would never tell me, go and DM this guy on Instagram who seems to be doing something cool and see what, that's not the advice that you're going to be given. And so everyone is not quite in sync and not really able to help one another, if that makes sense. And I think the way I interpreted it at that age was to try and start a consulting business that would help businesses communicate to young people. I really saw that as being an issue. But I think as I've maybe matured, I've realized actually the better way of doing that is, how can I help connect young people and companies with each other directly? And I think that is how Prospect 100 maybe over time has manifested. It wasn't a direct, oh, I thought of this and therefore it's that. It wasn't that. It's developed over years. And I think that's just me being like a naive 16-year-old at the time, like not quite joining the dots. And maybe I still haven't joined the dots. I don't know. But I think this is for me where the dots are beginning to join a bit more.
Yeah, I don't even know if there is such a thing as a direct path, even in the traditional sense. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've met over the course of my life who went to college, studied X, and now they do Y. I rarely encounter somebody that actually does what they studied or what they plan to do at whatever, 18, 19, 20, 21. Just out of curiosity, this is a totally inappropriate question, but I got to ask, how old are you?
So I just turned 22. So
22. Unbelievable. I remember talking to you the first time and you sound like you're 50. You know what I mean? You've got the knowledge and delivery of somebody who's been around for a long time. So you also were on the table with me. It's not like you didn't have exposure and access to some pretty smart people along the way. You've gone through traditional schooling, and then you've developed a pretty phenomenal network as a young person. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and maybe give people some perspective about not only what your background is, but also why you're willing to share some of that with the world?
So I grew up in a place called Bedford, and it's in rural England, I guess, about an hour northwest of London. And the fun fact, I guess, if you want to call it a fun fact, is that my family have lived in this same like 3 villages for over 600 years. So we're from like a farming background, and I've just always grown up in and around Bedford, and I love this place. And I find growing up in Bedford's been a massive advantage to me, because I think I've definitely met people that grew up in cities. And I just think maybe there's a bit more of a, like, everything's so accessible, I think, that you maybe take it for granted. Whereas when you're from Bedford, first of all, it's very easy to become good at something and maybe have the confidence, because if you play sport, you can win the Bedford League and you think you're the best in Bedford. And I think that gives you that self-confidence that maybe you need for such a small town that, not many people know, but some of the biggest pop stars in the UK are out of Bedford right now. Many of the biggest athletes are out of Bedford right now. The future I believe two of the biggest sports in England, cricket and rugby, I believe both of the future captains of England are both living in Bedford right now, etc. So we're both. So I'm really proud of where I come from. What I think's been interesting is when you live in somewhere like Bedford, you maybe don't necessarily always find the people who run the biggest company. You don't get that access. So when I found tools like, again, I really don't understand why people don't use Instagram more, because I think Instagram for me is better than LinkedIn is at being LinkedIn. But when you find at a young age tools like LinkedIn and Instagram, you can very quickly realize, wow, okay, I can use this to basically connect with anyone. Like, why would I even need to why would I need to live in New York or live in Bedford, London, or live in LA? I can go and meet all these people. And like, if I arrange a day in London where I can go meet 5 in a row, I can just go for one day on the train, super easy, and go meet 5 people back to back. So I was super fortunate to meet both of my co-founders through Facebook. Adam Flanagan from Belfast, who is running Europe's largest series of youth hackathons out of Belfast. And I met Alexandra Deonce, who goes by the name of Malinsky, who's one of the most prominent fashion designers in the world for his age, who's collaborated with the Rolling Stones, Paul McCartney, Snoop Dogg, Eminem, etc. And I really think that, you know, the three of us maybe epitomize the narrative of the kids of the internet, you know, because we all lived in completely different places, and in any normal universe we would never have ever crossed paths, but we all ended up a few years later having connected on Facebook and stuff, coming back together, starting a company. And Alex and Adam had never met each other at the time, and so I love to tell people, I'm like, if you're interested in fashion, why don't you go and add Malinsky on Facebook, because you can then talk to him and learn from him, and his brand is stocked in Barney's, he's stocked in Harrods, he's stocked in Selfridges, Mick Jagger wears his clothes, like Rihanna loves his stuff. You should go and learn from him because he's 18. And guess what? An 18-year-old probably has more free time and is more willing to speak to you than somebody who works at a company who's super busy. You know, go speak to this 18-year-old, and I guarantee they're coming at a place which is actually maybe even more relevant because they built their organization during this time we're living. Like Alexander was known for building his brand based off of Instagram, basically. These are the people I think we can learn the most from, because they're the ones who are doing it right now in this like current climate.
Right.
So I've always been trying to promote people to like connect with one another and message and hang out or whatever. And obviously some people maybe didn't necessarily like being me bombarding them with DMs, etc. But I think that's just always been something I'm passionate about. I don't think it really comes from any like sense of necessarily wanting to like go out there and try and make things happen or try and like connect people. No, it's just like if someone talks to me, even if it's for the first time ever. I remember meeting this girl kind of recently in Oxford, and she was telling me about doing this kind of startup to do with there's a massive problem in the UK right now with spiking in nightclubs, but not just spiking in the drinks, but actually spiking with needles in nightclubs. Okay. And that's come out of the pandemic. It was something that really before the pandemic didn't, I'm sure it existed, but not to the degree that it does now. And so she's created a startup around that and wanting to connect with more musicians. And so I was like, well, you should meet this person because they have this amazing host and they work with so many musicians. And it's like, even the first time I met her, it's just, I love this. I want to see ideas come to life. I love talking about ideas. I love talking about other people doing amazing things. And I just think it's really come from it's not like an agenda it's just something that happens. I can't really explain it, I guess. But yeah, the connection, I think you find as well, you just bump into, I don't know how I met 2 or 3 of my best friends, you know, because it just happens. I don't know.
You went to school, you said you lived away at school, right?
Yeah, so I went to a boarding school, but I actually was a day student. So it's a school in Bedford. I was super blessed to be able to go to this school because you get students from all over the world. And so I'll just be sat there in a lesson, like next to a friend called Adrian, who's from Hong Kong, and then maybe next to a guy called Ivan from Russia or whatever. It's like, wow, in what universe does this ever happen? And I think that's another thing about a town like Bedford, where you're lucky to have everyone from around the world coming to a school like this, because again, it's, you know, I think there was this massive sense of pride. Like, we're so lucky to be around all of these people. And Bedford's known for giving away a massive number of scholarships. You know, there are very few students really that you know pay the fees, etc. that the school requests. It's mainly the overseas students that do that. So you'll be sat next to students from all across the UK as well, who are mega talented, who the school have gone and picked out. And so when you're watching the sports team, you're watching, as I said, you know, most of the England rugby team have come from Bedford in one way or another. It's a massive rugby town. And so I believe Bedford schools have the most England rugby players of any school in the world. And so it's like, you know, when you're watching the sports teams, it's the highest standard you can imagine. Or when you're going to watch the music concerts or whatever, it's the highest standard you can imagine of it for 18-year-olds. And so the opportunities to be around people who are really talented. And I think that most people, when you think of a boarding school, you can think of some like stuck-up kids who parents make loads of money and there's no drive. And I definitely have met, you know, people or even seen schools where that feels true. But I think again, really luckily to be at somewhere like Bedford, because a lot of people are there based on merit and based on talent. And I think that it makes you kind of look around the room and go, you hold yourself to a certain standard when you're there, because
Yeah.
if you're not in the first team at your school, then how the hell could you ever become a professional? If you're not even the best at your school, but all the people at the school team are with professional teams. And so it's like you hold yourself to a different standard. I think what's really interesting with that is, maybe from my perspective, I don't know if everyone else felt this, but if I wasn't the best at something, I would then do it for fun. But I realized I'm not good enough to do this. So you go and find other things that you can be the best at. I think that was a really interesting dynamic, which maybe is unique to someone at Bedford. What it did make me value is, first and foremost, you value talent over everything. Not talent, but like drive, for example. So when you're in a school, I guess you're all wearing the same like uniform. You're all doing the same. You attend the same classes. Like your socioeconomic background or whatever means nothing. Like if you're in the first team for sport, that's how you're graded. Or if you're top of the class, I think you definitely value that more, and you appreciate people that put in effort or put in, rather than what your surname is. I remember turning up to the register of my first day at university, and literally, like, this place is pretty famous in the UK now, but every one surname you knew pretty much. And there's a lot of people like that who are ex-aristocrats, or like half the streets in London are named after my class, basically. And so I think, like, you look at a lot of these kids and it's like, okay, I don't really care about your surname, to be honest, because I care more about the Ketnipses of the world, who no one knows what his surname is. No one knows he really exists, but what he's doing on Instagram is unreal. I really appreciate the Malinskis or the Adam Flanagans, or the people like Emilio Gaith and Vernon Ollie Gray and the people I was at school with, etc. Like, I don't know. I don't like to maybe dwell on it too much, because I'm just so much more like.
I get it. Well, but what strikes me about you, Harry, is you're very comfortable in a conversation. Your generation gets labeled as, hiding behind the, the cell phone. Just. I went to a restaurant recently with my wife. There's a table of young people behind us. There was zero conversation at the table. 6 people sitting there staring at their phones, no communication. And that was like, in a nutshell, how the 20-something crowd gets labeled by the 50-something crowd. Like, look at these guys, can't even have a conversation. You're the opposite of that. I mean, I've only met you twice on this, but you seem to be very comfortable not only accessing the technology to expand your network, but you're very willing to put yourself out there in a conversation to communicate. Do you feel like at any level that's something that you're helping the 25 and unders do?
I don't know if we're helping, because I definitely see, like, I was on a road trip with some friends the other day, and everyone but the driver was on their phone. I was like, guys, like, for me, a road trip should be singing songs and like going crazy, like, crazy, like, yeah.
I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, 100%. I get that. I think one of the interesting things was, like, when I was growing up, I spent a lot of time around older people. Like, a lot of my dad's friends are 10 or 20 years his elder. They're always kind of maybe challenging you or whatever. So maybe that was part of it. But also, again, maybe it goes back to school a bit. I'm not sure, but I was never like one of the talented kids. And I wasn't first team for any of the sports, really. I wasn't. I was very much the middle set academically. And I think what that made me do is, anytime I had a question or a query, I would just go and ask, like, I always found best if I learned by doing. And I think conversation for me is a means of doing and being active. And like, you get a recall of them saying something, maybe it's to do with the accent in their voice or whatever, but there'll be something that makes you remember it. It's obviously quicker to go on the internet. And if it's a dumb question, for sure, I still will. But if there's something I'm genuinely interested by, I'd way rather pick up the phone and have a 30-minute conversation with someone. And I think, I don't know if that's anything symbolic of me, or just people maybe that learn in the way that, like, if you're someone that's a kinesthetic learner, I believe it's called, learn by doing.
Feeling, doing.
That might be a trait of this kind of learner, I think. It's.
You said to me the first time we talked, we can educate ourselves for free.
Yeah, well, the one thing, again, it goes back to that kind of kid dynamic, where previously, if you ever had a question, you would go to your parents or whatever. And I remember saying to my granddad one day as a joke, because my dad had been pestering me about, like, teaching him how to turn the computer on or whatever. Like, my dad is super, super anti-tech, basically. And I was saying to my granddad, when dad was younger, did you ever ask him questions? Like, obviously not. I'm the adult in this situation. I'm the omnipotent, omniscient being, and that's my kid. And I was like, well, dad keeps asking me questions, so tell him to leave me alone or something, as a 7-year-old or whatever. But then actually, when you're older, you kind of realize, actually, that's kind of crazy, because really, that that dynamic should exist. And I think it's interesting now that because we're young people, we instantly are supposed to know about more about technology. And I think that's created an interesting dynamic. And I think it maybe has created a dynamic where, I don't know, maybe we're pretty good at teaching ourselves or learning to teach ourselves. And I think the fact that we have things like YouTube, which is one of the greatest levelers in existence. You know, if you want to learn a song, like previously, if you wanted to learn music, right? If you're my dad, you would have to go and get a music teacher, which would be ridiculously expensive. And they would teach you in the way that they want you to be taught. So you'd learn scales, chords, whatever. And that's super boring. Like, who wants to learn that? Everyone wants to learn how to play Hey Jude or Let It Be or something. So you can sing along with your friends and look cool
That's it.
in front of a girl or something, you know, by playing a song at a party.
Yeah.
And I think with YouTube, you can learn not only for free and en masse. Like, again, if you can only afford 1 hour of tuition a week, that's all you could do. Whereas now I can go and take 4 hours worth of piano lessons, like literally as soon as we finish this call on YouTube, but I can teach myself in the way that I want to be taught. So I think what's really interesting is now not only can we teach ourselves for free and en masse, but we can teach ourselves in the way that we want to be taught. So again, if you want to learn a song and you learn this one song and you master this song and do hours just learning the song, when you go and play it, people are impressed. And they go, well, we want you to learn this one next, you know. Yeah. And then maybe after you've learned 4 or 5 songs, then you go, okay, I'm actually interested in the piano. Now let me teach myself the chords. Now let me teach myself the scales and learn technical music. Like, I think I'm right saying that Beatles didn't learn how to read music maybe ever, let alone, they definitely didn't at the beginning. And so I think it's really indicative of people that probably learn by passion and learn just to play a song and write whatever. And just, I think that's, for me, is also really interesting. And people, I don't think really talk about that at all. You know, we obviously look at YouTube as a means of learning for free and en masse. And like, you can be anyone, anywhere in the world and learn anything you want to do. And you can basically become anything now, which I think is really powerful. Again, like, how does a 16-year-old at high school have the balls to try and tell companies that they should be paying him to consult them? Like, that's ridiculous when you think about it. But I think actually we are a generation that's growing up believing that you can be whatever you want. Because if I turn around now and say, I want to be the next Led Zeppelin or something, you know, I could spend the next 10 years using just YouTube to try and become Led Zeppelin. I probably won't get there, but you know, I might get pretty close. I might get to the point where I can get a few paid gigs or something. And I can teach myself, and as long as I believe it, you can do it. And you can portray yourself on Instagram. No one needs to know your name, your age, where you're from, anything. Like, I could be on Instagram portraying myself just as a brand that's based in London, and no one needs to know any different. And as long as I can turn up for meetings being in London, that's, I guess that's pretty cool. You know, I think that's a really powerful thing. And again, my dad or my mum, you never really have the opportunity to learn music in that way, or to start a business, or to start it. Like, imagine saying to my dad at 16 or my mum, start a charity. You know, I believe there's this issue with government legislation. You should go and start an organization that is going to mobilize hundreds of thousands of people across the country and push for a change in the laws. You know, very rare circumstances did that happen throughout history. We obviously look towards Rosa Parks or Martin Luther King or the suffragettes, etc. But they weren't 16. Whereas now we're talking about individuals. Now everyone's obviously heard about the climate change movement going on and how that's led by young people. But no one looks at people like Bamini Love in the UK, who led and obviously in America, you guys have Nadia Okamoto that led the period poverty movement. Mm-hmm. They were both like 16, I think, when they started. Maybe Bamini was even 13. Now in the UK, for the first time ever, the tampon tax was removed. And again, almost completely down to individuals like Bamini, who started when they were 13, 14, 15. And I believe a number of states in the US have done it as well. Again, thanks to people like Nadia Okamoto. So again, in what world are 13, 14, 15-year-olds learning about this issue that's in society, probably then going to YouTube to learn, how do I set up a charity? How do I start a nonprofit? Going onto Instagram to follow people that run big organizations, to see what they're doing and really study their kind of blueprint almost. Again, in what world can I go and touch Elon Musk, pretty much, you know, one of the richest men in the world? You know, you can go onto the internet and follow him on Twitter and see how he's thinking, or go onto Instagram and see how he lives and really learn about these people. You become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Yep. So why would I spend time with 5 people that aren't as passionate as me about the same thing, etc.? So in this day and age, that could be Elon Musk, that could be Evan Spiegel. Follow them on Instagram, follow their Snapchat, follow their Twitter, like them on Facebook, whatever it might be. You go onto YouTube and watch thousands of hours of their content, and you can surround yourself with them all day, every day. And I think when you look at people like Nadia and Bamini, that's probably what they did. And again, I didn't exist in the 80s or the 70s, so I don't know what was and what wasn't possible, but I can take a pretty good guess based on conversations I've had with my parents. And I believe that if you were trying to be the Bimini Love or the Nadia Okamoto of the 80s, that was probably near impossible. They've been able to raise money through crowdfunding. They've been able to mobilize people on Instagram. They've been able to create petitions on the internet, which if you get a certain number of signatures means the government have to debate it. And so how many of these access points existed even 30 years ago? And again, it goes back to that point of young people maybe understanding a lot of these things in some ways more inherently, I guess, than older generations. And so are people like Bimini actually the best ones to be pushing for this, because they're the ones who understand the systems better than anyone from day one, like from the age of 13, when your brain is still like a sponge, you're surrounding yourself with these people on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and Snapchat and whatever. Obviously, these people are a minority. There are still loads of kids who are wasting their time on social media or wasting their time playing games. And we can look at the bad sides of social media, but again, being that kind of proud, optimistic individual. And I'm sure that makes me blind to lots of really bad things. And I apologize for my naivety and ignorance on that level. But I really want to look at the people like Bimini and say, how can we as society identify these people earlier? How can we support these people earlier and in a bigger way? And maybe again, that's how Prospect 100 came to be. Again, I still don't really know how Prospect 100.
I think you're bringing it full circle. I mean, that's where I think this is headed, is that you see an opportunity. How do I let more people know about it? You remind me of you may or may not have read it. It's been around for, I don't know, 10, 12 years, Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. If you've read that, all the examples in there, from the Beatles to Bill Gates to, you name it. A lot of their success stems from the fact that they became passionate and interested in something as kids, 12 years old, 13 years old, and they just practiced and learned, and their curiosity and their willingness to dive deeper is what ultimately created their success over time. And the other person that comes to mind as you're talking, not that you remind me of him, but early Tony Robbins would talk about, when he wanted to know something or wanted to learn something, all he did was go ask somebody that knew it or demonstrated it. And then through those interactions, he started to accumulate knowledge and awareness and things like that. I feel like that as you're talking, if you want to know something, you reach out to somebody, you proactively take the time to be curious. But it starts to me with that whole passion. You've got to be interested or curious about something in order to even go to those steps. So that's what strikes me when you're talking, is you seem to be genuinely interested in learning and accumulating knowledge and then sharing that knowledge, which, again, back to Prospect 100, is that ultimately what you're trying to make available to these 25 and under people? Give them that platform where they can now have access to the same things that maybe they didn't know they had access to.
Yeah, I think the thing that I've really, again, kind of studied, and I think we obviously very much focused on design. So I really spend a lot of time, obviously, with people like Malinsky, who, when you look at something like the world of fashion, a young newcomer in the world of fashion is like 33. You're never 17. You're never 17. But actually, Malinsky was 17 when he broke into fashion. He was the youngest designer ever featured in Vogue, I believe. And I've always wondered, right, okay, how can we take what Malinsky's doing? There's an obvious way that you can teach people, but again, like, you can sit Malinsky down and interview him and whatever. But it goes back to that point of, I learn best by doing, and maybe other people do too. And I think that physical demonstration is pretty cool. So what I think is really magical about Prospect 100 is we're able to sit down and go, like, what would be the dream? Like, if you're a 19-year-old designer, what's going to take you to the next level? What's going to really maybe open your mind to this, or even just open spectators' minds to this? People that were involved maybe didn't get the opportunity, unfortunately. And you can dream pretty wild about it, and then you go, right, why isn't that maybe possible? So obviously, if you want to go and, like, one of the big things I think for most artists, like Daniel Arsham's a great example of someone who's older doing this, but things like collaborations, so to have a collaboration with a brand is a massive deal, because not only do they then have the infrastructure and you can do potentially more, but also they're going to be promoting your name to millions of people, right? And it's obviously cool for the brand to be working with a young up and coming designer. I think everyone wants to support young people. Like, you have to be pretty heartless to not like that as an initiative, right?
Right.
Okay, so thinking, why would a brand not do that? Well, when you're young, you don't have a name. And at the end of the day, it does need to make business sense for all these organizations. Like, they need to guarantee that this is going to create some kind of excitement or marketing buzz, etc. So hang on, why doesn't Prospect 100 become that entity that has the name? Why doesn't Prospect 100 become the entity that's got that credibility behind it, let's say? And so when you're a brand, you can work with Prospect 100 and guarantee that hype, that credibility, but you can also offer that opportunity to that really talented young kid that you want to, like deep down, you really want to work with them, but it doesn't make business sense or whatever. We'll help you make marketing and business sense through our name, but we want you to offer this opportunity to a young designer because we really believe in them. And I think we've been very fortunate that a number of, and obviously as we get bigger, hopefully it becomes easier, but we've been very fortunate. And I think our most recent competition for me is an absolutely mind-blowing one. And that was with Swatch, the watch brand, where we asked people, to enter the competition, what if Swatch would have a monogram? So, logo design is probably as high level as it comes. And it's like, design, if Swatch were to have a new logo, design it for us. Let's see, let's put you to the test. And the winner will not only receive a massive cash prize, but also will work on an official collaboration with Swatch. Now, remember, Swatch have like 3,300 stores around the world, and that includes the sections in airports, etc.
Right.
So if you have a collaboration with them, your name will be seen by literally billions of people. They have millions of followers on social media, and they have a die-hard collector fan base. There will be people interested in your name. And the fact that we've been able to go and source that opportunity and then present that to young people from all around the world. And what's been amazing is actually Swatch have gone well above and beyond, and they love some of the talent so much that they want to actually extend the number of collaborations to more than just the winner, which I think is highly, highly commendable of them to do so. Obviously, they really didn't need to do that. And so to see a brand that's willing to offer that opportunity. Now, if you're a young designer, you see that, hopefully you start to join the dots about how important collaborations can be for your development. Again, when you're at school, if you want to become an artist, your teacher's never going to say, why don't you send 1,000 emails to different brands to get collaborations because they have a following and that can grow your following. And when you then approach another brand, you've already worked with a big brand, you know how it works. And you're going to learn by doing that one collaboration that lasts 3 months, way more than you probably learned in 3 years at uni because you've actually physically done it.
Right.
No one's telling you that, but that's really how I see it personally. And that's from Alex's experience having collaborated with some of the biggest musicians and entities in the world. And so we've really made it our mission to go out and go, right, with each competition, let's go and get 10 celebrity judges, because again, for the brands involved, that's a big part for them for the marketing aspect and whatnot. But actually, if you're a young person, even if you don't win, just to have had someone like Steve Wozniak, who judged one of our competitions, talk about you and say good things about you, that can give you a self-confidence boost, I think. And again, I go back to, I really think self-confidence is probably the most important thing. Like having the self-confidence to believe in yourself is a massive, massive thing. And so if we can provide that by asking some judges to give thoughts on a few people, that's a big thing. And so, yeah, the judges that can help give self-confidence to young people, and then the brands that can give this career-defining opportunity. Like to work with a brand like Swatch really is a career-defining opportunity. And we've obviously worked with other brands like Viacom, CBS, to work with their Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle franchise, work with Kering, the group that own Gucci, Balenciaga, Yves Saint Laurent, Bottega Veneta, etc. And so companies are willing to do it as long as it makes sense. I think that's what we're just trying to be. We're trying to be the entity that makes it make sense.
You're like American Idol or The Voice. Without downplaying what you do, you provide the platform for the talent to come in. You showcase the talent. The judges evaluate it, and all of a sudden they're exposed. They have exposure. This is where I'm thinking your network has helped, or your partner's network has helped, where you bring guys like Steve Wozniak in that actually take the time to listen and provide feedback. There's that whole piece of it. Then you've got to attract the talent. So you've got to do both, right?
Yeah, well, Wozniak's a hilarious story, actually. So to be honest with you, when we started, we knew basically no one, but we started at the beginning of lockdown. So Alex knew a few people, which was great to lean on, etc. And like he knew how to reach out to people, which is great. And so we definitely did start with a head start. I won't ignore that fact for sure. But a lot of people do presume that, like, particularly, oh, like you guys must have known all these people, like your pet. Like, no, honestly, it was very much just through Instagram and email. And I think Wozniak epitomizes this, to be quite frank with you. And we took a bet in lockdown, actually, people are goodwill. Like if we say this is a nice initiative for young people, you're going to support. And obviously the first like handful of competitions, there were no brands involved. So it was super, super like completely pure if you want to look at it from that angle. And so, if you send 1,000 emails, surely 1 or 2 are going to say yes. And if you get 1 or 2, surely you can go and get a few more. And I think also there's a bit of a storytelling element. Like you can get people that maybe are slightly easier to get hold of. So for example, You could get someone that's linked to an artist, like maybe they're a manager or an agent. And so it's like, you can be judged by the agent of Harry Styles, for example, you know, that's a slightly more, like the storytelling narrative is still super powerful and whatnot. But Wozniak's a hilarious story. I think this sums up Prospect 100 in a nutshell. Basically, when we started, we did competitions in a few different fields just to give everyone to try a few different areas. And technology was the second one we did. And we wanted an amazing judging panel. So we spent ages reaching out to people. And we sent an email. And I think Jeff Bezos's PA replied to us. We're like, oh, crap, we could actually get like a big hitter here. So we kept going for it. We were meant to start the competition on a Friday. Thursday, we get an email from Steve Wozniak's assistant, or I don't remember the exact relationship. But whoa, okay, let's get on a phone call right now, and we have to explain that we're starting tomorrow, so we need a yes straight away. Speak to this guy on the phone, and it sounds great. He's like, right, I'll speak to Steve tonight, blah blah. He goes, how much is the budget? No, we have a policy where we don't pay judges and we ask everyone to work for free. And we've already had people like Ronnie Wood of the Rolling Stones support, and we've had some pretty big names. So it would be amazing if Woz could just do this out of the kindness of his heart. He goes, okay, let me ask and let me get back to you. So a day goes by, gets to Friday, and we go, right, if we don't get a response, we'll delay the start of the competition till Monday latest. We don't get a response Friday. Saturday, no response. We send an email to the guy on Sunday, no response. Right, let's just delay till Wednesday because this could make the whole thing amazing. Monday night or Tuesday morning or something, we go, right, okay, last ditch, what we're going to do is this. The guy that emailed us, we can see the structure of his email. We are going to email him a massive email in full explaining the whole thing and why Woz should do this. And in blind CC, we are going to put every possible email that could be Steve Wozniak based off of his agent's email, because his agent was from Wozniak's website. So we put in blind CC maybe like 50 different emails, you know, like was like, let's say the website's was.com or something, it'd be like was at was.com, Steve at was.com, whatever. Like we tried everything.
Yeah.
Gets to Tuesday night, like 2 a.m. I just finished for the day, obviously before the competition. I went to McDonald's to go and get a milkshake. I was sat in the car park and we just get an email from Steve Wozniak. No. And the guy said, hey guys, so sorry about this. You were in touch with my booking agent, but this is something that I want to do. This is something I'm really passionate about. My booking agent has to deal with paid opportunities, but this is something I want to do. In fact, I don't just want to be a judge. How can I be more involved? I'm like, whoa, this is nuts. And I think that for me sums up, like, we're pretty relentless. That I don't care if I piss you off and send you too many emails and you tell me to F off, you know, like I don't mind, because at the end of the day, I've got to ask. If I don't, it doesn't happen. And Alex really instilled this in me. Alex, this is what I think he is ridiculously strong at, and which is why he was probably the biggest name in fashion at 17 years old. It's because he's just relentless. And I think, you know, having someone like Wozniak, and again, I don't know him. I don't know anyone that knows him. There's not even an Apple store in my town. You know, it's like you have to go quite a long way to find an Apple store. To be able to literally, it was that easy. Email the guy that started the #1 company in the world, and arguably changed the world. Like, that man changed the world because he was the brains behind Apple in terms of the tech. For me, that was the first time I've ever been starstruck on like a FaceTime with Wozniak. You know, and he CC'd his wife in so that we could always get through to him, etc. And so, I mean, I think that really epitomizes the spirit that we have as kids, who we don't care if you tell us no. And I really don't mind if I harass you a bit too much, because I really believe in what we're doing and I want to make it happen. But it also goes to show that everything, and obviously we don't tell the story too much because, you know, I don't want everyone harassing.
I'm calling him when we hang up. I'm going to give him a call. I'm telling Harry told me to call you.
But yeah, well, unfortunately, yeah, I'm sure a few people from our competition probably did take that message. But I think that is what really epitomizes like our spirit and the fact that we didn't have connections, but also in this day and age, you don't need them. Like, but that going back to the marketing, it then becomes so much easier, right? Like when you send an email to a school, you go, yeah, we're running a tech competition. And by the way, Wozniak's the head judge. Like, all of a sudden, every single tech student in the world wants to be involved. And I remember there's a big series of universities in India called the Indian Institute of Technology, supposedly the hardest university to get into in the world as well, actually. every blimmin' student from one of these, so they've got about 6 or 7 colleges around the whole of India. Everyone was applying, and it got to the point where there was actually threads on Reddit of people saying that competition was fake because it wasn't officially booked through his booking agent. We weren't on his calendar, and just no one believed that Wozniak was actually involved. And so we had people like teachers from IIT emailing us. We had Reddit threads saying like boycott this competition. And so when the competition actually like came out and we had this live final with Wozniak on live stream, etc. And we've got this amazing quote now where it says, Wozniak says, I'm so proud to be a part of Prospect 100. Yeah, that for us, that was a massive moment. And I think it really made us believe that, anything really is kind of possible. Again, we're a small organization. To collaborate with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, to collaborate with Swatch, to collaborate with Caring, most people say it's impossible. But if you don't ask, like, you'll never know, I guess. It might be possible, who knows? And so I think that's just really made us dream, like in a massive, massive way, and we're not scared of kind of anything.
So you get me so caught up in this conversation. I never asked any of the none of the questions that I was going to ask you because it was so interesting. It's like I'm so encouraged by your enthusiasm, your optimism, and I think this would be a great lesson not only for 25 and under, but honestly 50 and older and 25 to 50. There are just too many people out there that don't even know these ideas and questions and people are available to them. Part of it just stems from the fact that you're curious by nature. But where is Prospect 100? Where is it today versus where was it when it started, and where is it going?
Where it's going is a very hard question because I think we're still such a young organization, and when you're at this stage, I don't like the idea of being necessarily like you should always have goals, etc. But I think my goals aren't necessarily so. Okay, I believe we could. What TED is to talks, like when you think of a public talk, you think TED, and it becomes a pop culture reference. When you finish a ramble, thanks for coming to my TED talk, whatever. I believe that we can be to design competitions what TED is to public talks, and I really like that as a goal because it's something you keep striving for, and it's very kind of brand orientated, but it's not necessarily. It doesn't restrict you from pivoting slightly. Like we know we will always do competitions, right? So I like that as a goal. But there might be slight pivots along the way. And I think that that's a really nice goal because I couldn't tell you, like maybe Prospect 100 becomes a competitor to Tumblr or something, we become a design in social media. I don't know. Maybe we become a scaled ad agency. I don't know. Maybe we become like a TV show. I don't know. I don't know what we're going to become, to be quite honest with you. But I like as a goal, the idea that we should be like, when you think design competitions, you think Prospect 100, and I think I really want us to be in the position where every young designer in the world wants to be in that 100 list in the way that, people want to be Forbes 30 under 30, or they want to be whatever list. Like that's a goal. I still don't know in my heart of hearts where we're necessarily going because we're still very young. We're like not quite 18 months old yet. So right. I think there's a lot of learning to go. But where we started, again, we started with the music competition. We started with a tech competition. We did a design competition very last minute at the end of 2020. So, I mean, we've only ever done really 3 design competitions, if I'm being honest with you. So we're still very, very young. But I think we've come quite a long way in terms of we now understand our brand a lot more. We understand the structure, the exact structure of what we're doing. And we're trying, I guess, to now at this point reinforce our format and reinforce our structure and reinforce everything to do with our brand. I think that's where we're at the moment. And obviously we've been able to work with some amazing brands that has allowed us to be revenue generating, etc. And we are able, so we've just literally this morning actually employed our 4th person to work on partnerships, etc. So there's obviously 3 co-founders. We have 2 design interns and now 4 people who work in partnership. So we're slowly growing as an organization. But yeah, to be honest with you, I still don't know. I think there's lots of different ideas that people come up with, and we're always seeing really interesting things. Like obviously Masterclass is a really interesting platform, the kind of educational video, and like, could you become a masterclass for design and the courses that ended with these competitions? I don't know. I guess it's interesting. There are lots of design tech companies like Figma out there. So maybe does Prospect 100 look at creating its own software for designers? I don't know. There's a lot of platforms like Fiverr and Upwork. So do you become a kind of platform where businesses, because obviously we've already got that element of businesses collaborating with young people. So maybe you do a kind of more scaled version of that. I don't know. Maybe you become very entertainment centric and go, as you said, pop idol or whatever. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
very hard at this stage, but I would definitely say the one thing that is super important to me is obviously the brand element. I want us to be known as the number one place. If you're someone that wants to uncover the best young talent, that should be us you go to. So whether that is an art collector wanting to buy NFTs of young artists or something, or whether that is a brand wanting to collaborate, or whether that is just someone that loves art that wants to follow and see the next best talents, or whether you are that young talent and you think by winning one of our competitions that will help you secure a job or that will be great on your CV, etc. That's what I want to be known as, I guess, that just the kind of meeting point for people that want to see amazing young designers, and obviously young designers that want to get exposed to those people.
I love that you don't know, because sometimes when you know it, you limit your potential. When you decide, hey, this is where we're going, this is our goal, you may be missing out on so many other options. So I love that you don't know. It could be 100 different things or 1,000 different things. One other question on the talent that comes to you. Do you in any way vet that talent?
What do you mean by that? Sorry.
Does everybody get a chance to present their artistic ability or design no matter what, or do they have to meet a certain minimum threshold?
Yeah, no. So everyone that submits gets seen by at least 2 judges. So I think we're really good on that front. Now, obviously, because of the volume of applications, we can't respond to everyone. But what's been really interesting is, as I said, I don't come from a design background myself. So I spent a lot of time speaking with students from all kinds, like graphic design, fashion, architecture, etc. There are so many competitions out there that charge an entry fee that don't guarantee any kind of response. And the prize, to be honest, is pretty awful. Like, the fact I say always, maybe this comes back to bite me. Whilst I'm here, our competitions will always be free to enter. And so that way, anyone, anywhere in the world, and I think that's been shown by our last competition at applications from 55 different countries. Our best ever had 92 different countries represented. And, if you're the best designer, I don't care if you're from LA or London, we've had people from the Kingdom of Bhutan entering before, like multiple people from the Kingdom of Bhutan, actually. And I love the idea that someone from the Kingdom of Bhutan can beat someone from LA or beat someone from London to win a collaboration with Swatch. I love that. I love that as a concept. So that's one of the things we say. But everyone gets the chance to be seen. And importantly, obviously, at least 25 people be profiled on our Instagram. So even if, and obviously, like, you get the judges' comments, blah, blah, blah. But so even if you don't win, hopefully you get a bit of a self-confidence boost. Because the thing which a lot of people misinterpret with us is we do a public vote. So when you get to the top 25, the public vote for the 5 finalists.
Wow.
And what I love about that is, so I was in a competition when I was 17, and the public vote for me was the sacred bit, because that's where you post on Facebook or something, I'm in this competition, go vote for me. And all of your friends start to share it around, go vote for my friend, they're doing this amazing thing, these amazing judges have picked them out, they're the next big this, that, and whatever. And I think particularly with something like design, well, I remember the school I went to before that, the boarding school we touched upon, if you said to a teacher there that you wanted to study music, they might have gone, it's a great hobby, but have you thought about maths or accountancy? Or, theatre's great, but have you thought about law, or have you thought about medicine? It would be very, great hobbies, but they're not real jobs. And I think that probably a lot of designers face that at different points in their life. And sometimes that can even come from your parents or your best friends.
Yeah.
And so I think the fact that if you make the semi-final of our competition, you can turn around and say, no, 10 of the most influential people in the world selected my design out of thousands of applications, and they believe that I deserve the chance to collaborate with a brand like Swatch. All of a sudden, those friends that doubted you, that said, why the hell are you studying art at university, become your biggest supporters. My friend's the next big famous artist. My friend's going to collaborate with Swatch. Let's all go to the Swatch store. Let's go and buy the watches. I can't wait for the launch party, blah, 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 blah. This celebrity judge just put my friend on their story. All of a sudden, those people that doubted you, all those people that questioned behind your back why you were going to university to study that fake degree or whatever it might be, become your biggest supporters.
How do you guys, if you don't mind me asking, how do you guys make money?
Yeah, so there's a few different means. Our partner brands obviously provide a prize fund, etc. And so what happens is there's a fee involved in the running and operations of the competition. So yeah, that's the basic level, I guess. But there's a few There's a few other revenue models that we're looking at, because again, I don't like the fact that we're necessarily reliant on businesses. Like if I want to run a competition just to profile a good talent and offer an amazing prize, we should be able to. And I think we're definitely interested in the NFT space. I think that makes obvious sense at this point. And there's a few other things as well. But yeah, I think that's how we're doing it at the moment, and that keeps us going. And hopefully, first of all, I hope that's abundantly clear to everyone. And obviously, I really appreciate everyone that is willing to still obviously support us, even though we had to go down the route of, well, I think actually when I say had to, working with businesses for us is the best thing, because obviously doing a fictional prompt is cool, but doing something that's for real, doing something where you can work with a real brand, and the fact that these real brands can then offer crazy price. And obviously we've got a great thing where Malinsky still works on collaborations himself, so we know exactly what the market rate is for an established designer. So we make sure that every brand is paying at least kind of 1.5/2x what someone would dictate for that job if they were a freelancer, I guess. So yeah, I say, when I say the word had to, I don't mean that. I think we're very lucky to be able to work with these brands, and I appreciate the fact that everyone has supported that move as well.
I would have been embarrassed of my 22-year-old self talking to you. I am thinking, how does this much knowledge and experience get into a 22-year-old kid? It's unbelievable. I could not have carried this conversation. I can barely carry it now with you. It's really impressive. Your mind is very interesting.
I appreciate it, but I think all I'd probably do is regurgitate stuff that smarter people tell me. So spend a lot of time. I think we've been, again, in the same way we reach out to judges, we spent a bit of time at the beginning reaching out to some very smart people. Again, I believe anyone watching this or watching or listening, go and follow Catnips on Instagram. I truly, I say this to everyone. I hope he's not listening when I say this, because I don't like saying this to people's faces necessarily. I believe he's the next Walt Disney of our generation. I've never met anyone, like, you know how some people say when you meet someone, it's like you get blown up. I have not introduced Catnips to anyone who has said anything other than that was like a special moment in their life almost. No, it's everyone I introduced Catnips to is blown away. And I've introduced him to some people who have met a lot of people. Let's say he's incredible. And I think the fact that we are blessed enough to be able to speak with people like that, and also I'm blessed to be speaking with people like Alex and Adam on a near daily basis. In most cases, obviously Christmas became maybe one day off.
Yeah.
And there's also people that have helped us, like for example, Carmen Greco, that is the CFO of a media organization in London called Thread Media. There's like Miles Young, who at the moment is very unwell, so hopefully he gets through this okay. But he was the global CEO of Ogilvy and Mather, one of the biggest marketing firms. He's been very generous with his time to us since he retired from Ogilvy, etc. And so a lot of what I say is probably just, and obviously Adam Perrin as well, and Guy Holmes, who have been both super supportive as well and spent lots of time with me. So I think all I say is probably just regurgitations from them, to be honest.
Hey, then you and me both, man. You and me both. That's what we all are. It's just a byproduct of everything we've heard and experienced. What about people that want to reach out to you? How do they reach you? Who do you want to reach out to you? What kind of people are you looking to know?
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, I'm not a picky. If any of this has been vaguely interesting, or you want to DM about literally anything, whether that is whether you should send your kid to a boarding school in Bedfordshire, or whether you want to enter a competition, whatever it might be. My Instagram, everything is Harry CKB, or Harry Beard on anything. But yeah, honestly, or Prospect 100 directly. I'm ridiculously active on those social medias. So yeah, I appreciate obviously time. I'm so sorry for rambling quite a bit.
I loved it. You're the youngest guest I've had so far, and really, really impressive. I appreciate you taking this time. And I apologize because we spoke, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, and it took this long to get this going. So hopefully we can do one of these again in the near future. It was really, really fun talking with you, Harry.
I appreciate it. And if you want any more young people, I'm more than willing to make suggestions. Again, so many insane young people out there.
All right. Well, if they've got something they want to talk about, I'd be interested. I appreciate that.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Happy New Year. Talk to you soon.
Yeah. Ciao.
Thanks, Bye-bye.